بقول لك كل الوقت طيران رعب 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 في الخيال، ولا في الهنود تاع امريكا ولا في الخيال، ولا في اليمن ولا في ليبيا ولا في سوريا صار هذا الكلام، غير في رفح وفي مخيم يبنى. كنا نايمين ما بنعرفش ايش فيه، فجأة تفاجأنا بإطلاق نار كثيف. بالاول اطلاق نار اطلاق نار اطلاق نار، ايش فيه ما بنعرفش.
طلعنا سالمين، انا اللي معايا كانوا سالمين، لكن اللي حواليا ما بعرفش ايش صار فيهم. اللي حواليا انا ما بعرفش، لانه كل واحد الان نفسي وحاولنا نطلع ايش صار حوالينا لعند مأمنة اطفالي.
احنا كان الفصل شغال كنا فطارنا، بعدين انا حكيت لماما تحريتها كانت صاحيه، قلت لها بدي اروح على الحمام، حكت لي فجاه بلاقي كل الحيطان الحمام وقعت فوقيها وكل البراميل فوقيها.
تقريبا الساعة 2 إلى 10 2 إلى 5 ما سمعنا إلا صوت انفجارات. انفجارات يعني تقدر تقول إنه جهنم وانقلبت على الناس المدنية. تفرج إيش صار، تفرج.
A helicopter carrying 2 hostages freed by the Israeli Special Forces. They were rescued from the city of Rafah and brought to a hospital on the outskirts of Tel Aviv on the 12th of February. Louis Hare and Ferdinando Simon Marman were among 240 people kidnapped by Hamas on the 7th of October. The Israeli military says both men were healthy and taken to the Tel Hashomer medical complex. Hare and Marman were being held on the 2nd floor of a building in Rafah. The building was breached by an explosive charge in an Israeli raid that saw heavy exchanges of gunfire with surrounding buildings.
Tonight we brought Louis and Fernando back home. In a joint rescue operation of the IDF, the Shin Bet and the police SWAT team, we rescued Louis Har and Fernando Marman, who were kidnapped from Nir Yitzhak by Hamas on October 7th. This was a complex rescue operation under fire in the heart of Rafah, based on sensitive and very high-quality intelligence garnered by the military intelligence branch and the Shin Bet.
The Israeli army conducted about 40 airstrikes that struck Rafah city early on the 12th of February with intensive ground shelling. Located in the southern part of the Gaza enclave, Rafah is the site of the sole crossing point between Egypt and the Gaza Strip. Over 1 million displaced Palestinians are living here in makeshift tents, desperately looking to the other side of the border for help as they brace for a full-blown offensive from Israel. According to the official Palestinian news agency Wafa, the death toll from Israel's heavy strikes on Rafah has now exceeded 100, with hundreds of injured people, including women and children. Before the deadly offensive, US President Joe Biden told Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that Israel should not launch a military operation in Rafah without a credible plan to ensure the safety of millions of refugees sheltering there. 4 months into the war in Gaza, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu said he ordered the military to develop a plan to evacuate the population of Rafah and destroy 4 Hamas battalions that Israel says are deployed there. Hours after Netanyahu ordered the evacuation, Gaza's last safe zone came under heavy attack. Let's take you inside one of the most densely populated parts of the Gaza Strip that houses 8 refugee camps. Spanning 63 square kilometers, the southern city of Rafah shares its border with Egypt. On its left lies the Mediterranean Sea, and on the right is Israel. And this is Rafah border crossing, the lifeline of Gaza. This is the southernmost post of exit from Gaza's borders with Egypt's Sinai Peninsula. Before the war, the other border crossings in the Gaza Strip were Erez, a crossing into Israel in northern Gaza for people, and Kerem Shalom, a solely commercial goods junction with Israel in southern Gaza. Both are shut now. Rafah is now also the only crossing point for humanitarian aid, and that explains why the area is flooded with displaced Gazans. Its population has almost quadrupled to over 1.2 million people since the start of the conflict. Conditions are dire here. Many people are sheltering in cramped spaces that run the risk of infectious diseases. Tens of thousands have sought refuge in makeshift tents and under plastic sheets that offer little protection from extreme conditions. Amid all this chaos in the cramped refugee camps, a few are keeping hope alive. Meet pediatrician Raja Ukasha, who has taken it upon himself to examine children and give them medication for free. Ukasha is homeless himself after fleeing his home in Beit Hanun, and like the majority of Gazans, has ended up in Rafah. He started this makeshift clinic due to the lack of medical institutions nearby and his love for children.
Because of the war, the collapse of the healthcare system, and the absence of any hospitals or medical institutions near the camp where I'm staying, I used to examine 20 or 30 children inside the tent I'm living in. So I decided to start this initiative, a medical tent to treat children for free. The first reason I did this is my love for children. When I see a child, I feel the need to offer him treatment and to try and help him.
But the lack of cleanliness and the absence of food and water in the camp is spreading disease. Parents with sick children line up in front of the tent, waiting for Ukasha to examine them and possibly give them some medication.
I came here because my son is very sick. He has fever and diarrhea caused by the tough living conditions amid the war, with the absence of hygiene, of healthy food, of drinkable water, absence of cover at night, and absence of all means of comfort for children because of this war. My child is unwell because of all of these reasons.
We came here to treat our children, but the medicines given are not the ones needed, and not all medication is available. Yesterday, I came for fever and cough. I only took medicine for fever, But what about the cough? My son also has a rash in his leg.
Doctors and aid workers are struggling to provide even basic aid to the Palestinians around Rafah. Remember, when the war began, Israeli leaflets urged Gazans to move south as they attacked Hamas bases in Gaza's north. Soon after, the southern areas, including Khan Yunis and Rafah, started to get flooded with displaced Gazans. These satellite images give a sense of how internally displaced person or IDP camps expanded post-November in Rafah. But now, the so-called safe zone for the Gazans has also come under attack.
In the middle of the night, I heard the sounds of helicopters, fighter jets, drones and missiles all around. Our neighborhood had literally turned into a war zone. Everyone was petrified at that moment, as they had no idea where to hide, and in fact, there was no safe place to find. When I heard a place close to my uncle's residence was hit, I rushed there to check and found the remains of human bodies all over the place.
The United Nations says Palestinian civilians in Rafah need protection. It has also underscored that forced mass displacement is barred by international law. But Israel, on the other hand, is calling Rafah the last remaining Hamas stronghold in the territory. It is insistent that its ground offensive will target the town on the southern edge of the Gaza Strip. Israel says about 100 hostages remain in Hamas captivity after dozens were freed during a ceasefire in November. It also reported that roughly 29 other hostages were either killed on the 7th of October or died in captivity. And now the question is, what will happen to the civilians who are trapped against a border fence with Egypt? Egypt has made it very clear it will not allow any mass exodus of Palestinians into its territory of Sinai. It fears that a potential mass influx of hundreds of thousands of Palestinian refugees may never go back. To preempt a potential spillover from Gaza, Cairo has stepped up its security. It has dispatched up to 40 tanks and armored personnel carriers to North Sinai in the past weeks. Egypt is also threatening to suspend its peace treaty with Israel if Netanyahu sends forces into the densely populated Gaza border town of Rafah. After the 1967 Six-Day War, Israel defeated Egypt, Jordan, and Syria and occupied several lands including the Sinai Peninsula. Egypt and Israel had fought 4 major wars. However, in 1977, Egypt's new president Anwar Sadat broke with other Arab leaders and decided to talk with the Israelis. The year was 1978 when the Camp David Accords were signed. The talks between Sadat and then Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin started in Camp David, the country retreat of the President of the United States in Maryland. After 12 days of secret negotiations, Sadat and Begin signed political agreements that came to be known as the Camp David Accords. The 2 framework agreements were signed at the White House, witnessed by President Jimmy Carter. The frameworks led to a peace treaty between Israel and Egypt the following year in March. Under the 1979 peace treaty, Israel agreed to withdraw from the Sinai, that Egypt was to leave demilitarized. Israeli ships were granted passage through the Suez Canal, an important trade pathway. Both nations established full diplomatic relations. It was Israel's first peace agreement with an Arab country since it was established in 1948. The agreement even resulted in Sadat and began sharing the 1978 Nobel Peace Prize. The Camp David Accords are seen by many as the cornerstone of regional stability for nearly half a century. But they are now under threat. As more than 1 million civilians crammed into the southern corner of the Palestinian enclave, some displaced Palestinian families in Gaza's Rafah are fleeing the city, fearing an Israeli assault.
I fled Al-Maghazi, came to Rafah, and here I am, returning to Al-Maghazi. Last night in Rafah was very tough. We're going back to Al-Maghazi out of fear, displaced from one area to another. Hopefully, Al-Maghazi area would be safe, God willing. Wherever we go, there is no safety. Not in Al-Maghazi, not in Rafah, not anywhere. We wish safety for everyone.
Israel says it takes extensive measures to protect civilians, but is forced to conduct military operations in civilian areas because Hamas operates there. International mediators continue working towards a truce and a hostage-prisoner exchange. U.S. President Joe Biden said the United States is pushing for a 6-week pause in the fighting between Israel and Hamas. At the same time, he questioned Israel's strategy in Rafah. His remarks came during his meeting with Jordan's King Abdullah in the White House residence. Many world leaders have now raised their concerns over the situation in Rafah.
Major military operation in Rafah should not proceed without a credible plan for ensuring the safety and support of more than 1 million people sheltering there. Many people there have been displaced multiple times, fleeing the violence to the north, and now they're packed into Rafah, exposed and vulnerable. They need to be protected.
The situation is already unbearable for over 1 million people who have been pushed into Rafah since the war started. We cannot stand by and let this continue. We need a lasting ceasefire now. This war must end.
Besonders besorgt bin ich über die Ankündigung der israelischen Regierung.
I'm deeply concerned about the announcement by the Israeli government of a large ground military operation in Rafah. Of course, it is completely clear that also in Rafah there is an unbelievably large net of Hamas terrorist organization. We are facing an incredible dilemma.
Wir stehen vor einem unglaublichen Dilemma.
My sincere hope is that the negotiations for the release of hostages and some form of cessation of hostilities to be successful, to avoid a all-out offensive over Rafah, where the core of the humanitarian system is located, and that would have devastating consequences.
The incursion, the reports coming out are alarming. The head of the Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Relief have expressed grave concerns, asked where are these 1.6 million people supposed to go.
We are very concerned about what is happening in Rafah, because let's be clear, the people there, many of them have moved 4, 5, 6 times before getting there, and it really, we think, is impossible to see how you can fight a war amongst these people. There's nowhere for them to go. They can't go south into Egypt, they can't go north and back to their homes because many have been destroyed. So we are very concerned about the situation, and we want Israel to stop and think very seriously before it takes any further action.
EU has also expressed concern over the situation. A Dutch court ruled the Netherlands must stop delivering US-owned F-35 parts to Israel. The court cited a clear risk that the fighter jets would be involved in international law violations. As leaders voice their concerns, France has delivered a written proposal to Beirut aimed at ending hostilities with Israel and settling the disputed Lebanon-Israel frontier. The proposal calls for fighters, including Hezbollah's elite unit, to withdraw 10 kilometers from the border. The plan aims to end fighting between the Iran-backed Hezbollah and Israel. Back in Israel, the Hostages and Missing Families Forum warned that time is running out for the remaining captives. The campaign group urged the Israeli government to exhaust every option on the table to release them.
I'm here tonight to keep fighting for the release of my brother and the rest of the 135 hostages. Like every Saturday, like every day, we want them back. My brother has a 2-year-old son who lost his mother and is waiting for a hug from his father for 127 days. The world, the government, foreign governments, the media, everyone should do more in order to bring them back as soon as possible.
Most of us here at Hostage Square just want a hostage deal. We want our people to come home. We feel that no price is too high.
Israeli Prime Minister said only continued military pressure until complete victory will result in the release of all hostages. But at what cost?